I think this might be the largest group I've ever had on my screen all at once. Well, I see it's 6 o'clock, so I'll fill this quiet airspace with a little bit of noise for a few minutes. Welcome to the district-wide reopening committee. In a few minutes, we'll go over our purpose and the agenda. I hope that everyone did receive a copy of the agenda. There are a few links in there that may be helpful to you. But I thought it might be nice with the size of the group if you would just randomly take turns unmuting yourself and introducing yourself and your role either in the district or in supporting the district in this reopening effort. Can I pick on you, Janine, to get us started? Because it's always awkward to be the first one to go.
Sure. I love being picked on. My name is Janine Connolly, and I am the school counselor for the Little Wolf High School and Manawa Middle School.
I'll jump in now. I'm Danny Brower. I will be, as of Wednesday, Manawa Elementary principal, but I'm also the director of special education.
And I'm Luann Usadowski. I'm the elementary school counselor. Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Amy and I teach high school Spanish.
I'm Brian Covarrubias. I'm the director of technology.
I'm Dan Wolfram, principal, Little Wolf High School and Manawa Middle School.
Tracy Breaker, 7th and 8th grade teacher at Manawa Middle School.
I'm Mary Eck. I teach math and at-risk at the high school, and I am a co-coordinator for summer school.
Jessie Ort, para for the high school.
Steve Getters, I'm a medical advisor, a family practice doctor over in Ascension.
Jed Wolt, I'm the Wolfpack County Health Officer.
Jackie Greeno, a school nurse.
I'm Jacob Elsner. I'm the terminal manager for Cobus and Buses.
I'm Ashley Haas. I'm just a parent of a kid that attends the school there.
I'm Stephanie Risky. I am also a parent.
I'm Sandra Ryerson. I'm a grandparent of a couple of kids in the school district.
I'm Amy Bodard. I'm also a parent of 2 kids, one at the elementary, one at the middle school.
Did we miss anyone? All right, so as you've probably found out by now, it helps to mute when you're not talking. The buttons at the bottom, I'll explain in just a moment. I'm Melanie Apper, the district administrator, and this will be the start of my 7th year with the district. In your bottom toolbar, you will have a place where you can mute yourself or turn off the camera if you like. In your upper right-hand corner, you'll see a little box with lines in it. Looks like a cartoon voice box, and so that's the chat. So if you have any questions and you don't want to say them out loud, you can always type them into the chat box, and those pop up on the screen, and those are also recorded as we move through. Are there any questions before we get started? Google Meet is pretty simple and straightforward, not a lot of frills, but it does get the job done. So to get us started this evening, I thought one of the things that we could do would be to just take a look at the purpose of the committee and make sure everybody's clear and comfortable with the role of the committee. We're hoping to have the group as diverse as possible, people within the community, business owners like Ashley, people who represent parents and grandparents, caregivers who worked with kids this spring. We're home educators. Our bus company at some point will also have food service with us. A variety of teachers and administrators and support staff. And then, of course, the medical advice of the health department from Waupaca County and our medical advisor. So this is advisory, and the people you're advising is the Board of Education. So the goal is to put something together that fits your diverse needs, that mitigates the risk for as many people as possible, but provides as much service as suits the district in as many different ways as we're able to do. We also need people just to get the word out. A lot of people have no idea that we have spent weeks doing nothing but planning and working on reopening, but it isn't very highly promoted. And so we do need your help in getting the word out, but also for listening for concerns. You'll see, we'll look at our survey tonight and you'll get a little feel for what some people are feeling, but we also need to, I think, take the personal touch and just ask people what they're thinking and feeling, and if they think the reopening plan is going to be meeting their needs. And with that, I think I'll pause a minute and make sure everybody's comfortable with the task ahead. I'm getting one thumbs up. That's a good sign. And don't be shy. Just checking the chat box. Okay. And we're doing well. So the other thing that I wanted to let you know is that the goal would be to have a fairly solid draft of this particular reopening plan for the board to look at third Monday in July. So that's our next formal regular board meeting. And I think parents are eager to find out what we're planning. So one good way is to get it out there on a board meeting agenda, and from there, then we can use all the media outlets that we have available to us. So I might be asking for us to meet pretty heavily in the next couple of weeks, as much as is needed to get a plan onto paper. So I wanted to show you a few of the resources that we have available. Let's see. I think I opened too many tabs, but that's not unusual for me. Well, we'll do it the other way. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction came out with their document just last week. So if you click on the link in your agenda, it would take you to this page, and you do have to scroll about halfway down to get to Education Forward. There you'll find an extensive document that the administrative team has read and is working through. And basically it is guidance. It's a set of questions to help us think about what we could do. Everything from a totally virtual environment to how to do in person, but do that with a minimum of risk to both staff and students. Then we also had WIA summer guidance, and just today they came out with sports-specific guidance. So for every single sport, they talked about the process of entering the building, how to social distance, all the different people that may participate, how to handle the equipment, and the various activities you could do depending on if we're in a high risk, moderate risk, or low risk situation. So every sport has this level of detail attached to it. So one of the things that we've been talking about regularly with the statewide superintendents as well as the county superintendents with Mr. Wout is just talking about how to assess the level of risk we're currently in. And right now we're using a combination of what's happening statewide and what's happening locally. Jed, would you want to say a little bit more about the new information that's come out on risk levels and how we interpret that?
Sure. So the state has put together an activity level by region and county for COVID-19. And it's kind of a new format to put activity level into categories of high, medium, and low. And it's updated weekly, and it takes into account a few factors. One is burden, which is the case rate. And the burden is the total number of cases per 100,000. And then trajectory, which is a percent case change. So the trajectory is percent change in the last 2 weeks from the test against a percent change equal to 0. And that uses those two pieces to put together a activity level. And so burden status actually has 4 different levels of low, moderate, moderate, high, and high. And then if the trajectory status is medium or low, that enters into it. If there's a change, a significant change, that adds into it. And then if it's growing, that kind of puts it into a different category. When you put all those together, you'll come out with a level. And so for the first 2 weeks or week plus, Waupaca County has been in the high level. We've had a moderately high burden, and our trajectory has gone down, but the trend hasn't been significant. So with the moderately high level and trajectory not being significant with its trending, that still puts us in the high category. And we're in an area, surrounding counties are in a similar position. Winnebago, Allegheny, Portage are also in the high category right now, along with Brown and Manitowoc. The rest of the counties that we border, Waushara, Shawano, are in the moderate level right now, medium level. So that's one piece that we'll utilize to help assess of where we're at, along with, we're going to have a sense too, just locally on our numbers and the things that we know that are going on just based on our case investigations, and our contact tracing is going to also provide some level of information for us to make decisions on. But that's one piece. If you haven't seen it, it's on the state website, and it's I can put the link maybe in the chat too if you haven't seen it. There's a place where you can get it. It's on the State Department of Health website.
Oh, okay. So in your agenda, when you link, when you hit the link Wisconsin dashboard, that's the page you're going to get.
Okay.
And then once you get to that page, the map is all colored in. But if you find the county you're looking for and hope this is what it looks like when you first get there, when you find Waupaca County, you can then click on it and it will just bring up our specific information for Waupaca County. And being we're right in the center, we're a pretty good indication of what's going on around us. We also use the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So we've been using this, and I've been attending a couple of these live stakeholder calls, but they're also recorded, so you could go back and look at them. For summer school, we're using the one called Camps and Youth Programs. It just seems to apply more to the informal nature of some of the weightlifting and skill drill activities that are starting July 1. And then, of course, there's a whole section just on schools and child care programs. You'll find very similar patterns, though, in their recommendations. So those are available. Also, if you click on the link, it will take you right there. And of course, we also, as a district, annually, the board approves a medical advisor. So Dr. Geddards, would you like to say a few words about your role in helping to guide our decision-making as a district? Finding the unmute button is the hardest part.
There you go.
There we go.
It's constantly changing. It's hard to put anything in stone. We have to be very flexible is what I'm seeing. Every week it changes where we think we're heading on a downtrend. And now when you watch the latest reports come out today, it's up to like a 7%. And it's like, so we have to be adjustable with anything that we do. I mean, the biggest thing is we still have to promote, safety with, they said that, the three things is wearing a mask and washing and social distancing and everything that we do, that we can't let our guard down. Would be about it, but we're driven by what we're told by the state, and that's what we're trying to follow with these guidelines the best we can and adjust as we can.
And that's been huge, the idea of being flexible, because every day we learn new information that guides our thinking. We may come up with a plan or an option, and that option might be taken off the table when we realize that it really doesn't take into account all of the safety factors we need to provide. The other thing that's been kind of interesting for me is taking a look at parent perspective. When I've talked to people, a lot of people feel like everyone thinks the same way they do, that there's a common impression about what we should do. And looking at the survey was a good reminder that we don't all have the same perspective on what is the right thing to do. Even though our survey doesn't close until July 2nd, I thought it was pretty telling in that I can see some of the preliminary results. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised, but it does remind us that we have the whole spectrum of people, everything from go ahead and start school tomorrow, it can be just like it was last fall, to I'm going to be keeping my child home and they're looking for continued virtual options for education. And they're expecting us to be responsive to that broad dynamic. So the survey again closes on July 2nd. Please, if you know people who have not yet had an opportunity to fill it out, encourage them to do so. One of the nice features is that as the principals take a look at this, they can look at every grade level. So obviously, a parent of a very young child might respond very differently than the parent of a high school age kid, which we definitely saw. So hopefully you're able to see my screen, and you can see that so far we've had 179 responses, fairly good response rate for our district. When you consider we have roughly 650 families. So not bad to get 179 people answering a survey, especially in the summer when we know they have other options, other fun things to do. So we did ask people to both look back at how things went in the spring of the year and tell us what they think they're going to be doing in the fall. It was not an anonymous survey because we did ask some very specific questions about transportation, rough plans, technology, and if there are people that need help, we need to be able to reach out to them and get a hold of them. So you will see that education at home this past spring, we had quite a bit of poor and fair, more than what we'd like to see. So one of the things we know we need to do is improve upon how we provide technology support. We need to do more and make sure it works more smoothly. Bryant, I know you're on. Would you want to say a few words just at a high level as to what you're doing in terms of technology based on the look back? I think he's still on. Let me check.
I was double muted. Now I am zero muted. Sorry. Yeah. So what I was saying was that we initially started by trying to expand access to internet for families that didn't have it by making hotspots available to some families. Another area we found that was a large gap was access to technology for very young students. So from like the pre-K through 2 grade band, and then grades 3 and 4. So we sent them Chromebooks with everybody who was in 5th grade, and then 6 through 12, they were already one-to-one, so everybody already had devices. So trying to expand the one-to-one program to make devices more pervasive, and then trying to expand access to internet. And then if we end up having more people at home again, then we're gonna need to have more resources available for families to support the kids. So more of a support channel. So if parents need to contact somebody for help, they don't have to go directly to a teacher. They can talk to somebody instead.
And we also took a look and on where people were in terms of adults. Were adults available for kids during the day or for evening school support? And you see there's quite a diverse range of whether or not people were home, particularly as we got later into the spring. We know many of our families were back to work. I also talked to the legislators at least once a month, and they feel very strongly that the safest place for children is in school with us, especially when they know the parents are at work. It's better for them to be with us at school, being looked after. We feed them, we make sure their academics are in place, and we look after their health as well, and that this is a better option than having young children at home alone, because we know there is not enough daycare for all the young children if their parents are back to work. And I do believe that a good share, if not most of our parents, are back at work now. And probably the most important question is the planning question at the end. If they plan to send their child back to school this fall, and predominantly it is yes. There are a few that are unsure, and later in the survey, there are people specifically indicating that they're going to be keeping their child at home due to health concerns, and so they need alternatives. And we are prepared to provide for those. Technology was a separate section that we put in. And overall, our families did say they had internet access at home. And it was widely varied how people got access to do their remote learning. Most have both school and personal devices. Although there were a few comments that there are some families with multiple children in the home that felt it was the school's responsibility to provide more devices, that not every child had their own, and that was problematic for some of the children to complete their work at home. And then, of course, go ahead.
Just to add to that, some families also mentioned that if they had like 3 kids at home and they were working from home, then their internet bandwidth, even though they had internet, technically it wasn't enough to support 1 to 2 people working from home plus all of the students.
And then I thought the last question was very telling about how comfortable the parents were in supporting their children using technology at home. And that could be whomever was home, because we know there are a number of different caregivers. But the confident, slightly confident, or not confident and all is a pretty substantial number. So we were fairly well split across the board, but we'd like to see more people comfortable. And I know Bryant was talking about creating some little guides that we could have on the district website that would be little mini tutorials to show people how to use the technology. Transportation, Jacob will be interested in this. A goodly number are planning to ride the bus, but not lagging too far behind is home transport or the student who's old enough to drive him or herself to school. So it looks like the distribution might be helpful to us, that it seems like a higher than normal number of people are planning to drive their children to school, which might mean doing some physical distancing on the bus might be a smidge less of a challenge. So let me pause for a minute and see if you have any questions about the survey results so far.
Melanie, is it possible to make your screen just a little bit bigger, just to, might be easier to read?
Did that work?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. There we go.
Is there a link on the agenda to the perception survey results that are on your screen? Because it is still pretty small to read.
It's at this time, no. When it closes on July 2nd, they'll put together a compilation of all of the information, and then it will be ready to be sent out. But at this time, I'm actually just seeing the raw data live, and I'm not able to share it because it's a purchased product from a company. I should take that. I'm able to share it. I just can't make copies of it.
And the numbers might change slightly in the next 3 days.
I'm hoping they will go up. I'm pleased with the numbers so far, but I would love to have more people weigh in. We know there's the largest percent of our parents haven't responded yet. So they have a few more days. If you know somebody, please encourage them. And then I am also working on a staff survey that many of our neighboring districts were willing to share the draft of either what they're working on or what they have sent out to get a sense of the comfort level of staff and returning to work. We got a little taste of that this summer during the food delivery program that we ran during the spring of the year. So we got a little taste of, there is some anxiety. There are some people with underlying health conditions. So it'll be interesting to see how people are feeling, what their comfort level is in returning to work this fall. Any questions on the survey or anything so far? Well, eventually I'm going to make something pretty. I actually started it. But for tonight, I thought we would start with the working document that the administrative team has been looking at. We've spent quite a few hours, and we started with assumptions. This will be the foundation for laying out the specific plans. So I wanted to have your reaction. And I do hope you'll unmute and talk about what you're feeling about some of these assumptions. First and foremost, we're thinking 4K to 8 would come every day of the week, 5 days a week. And initially, we thought the high school might divide into an A and B cohort. But today, as county superintendents, we talked about having even the high school students come every day if we could get enough furniture out of the rooms to physically distance all of the students' desks, or we could move teachers with larger classes into larger spaces so that they would be able to attend in person every day. And then we'd have to do a few exceptions that we talked about, like if you're in a science lab and we need to be close together around the lab station, then we're going to dress like a scientist in a professional lab. We'd wear our goggles, we'd wear our masks, and we'd probably be wearing gloves depending on what products we're working with. So thoughts on that?
I did see in some cases they were doing half days. So like they'd come every day, but they'd only do a half a day, so that the kids and the teachers could still get that interaction, but be able to have more students in a day. Be something that could be looked at.
I don't know if that would be an issue with cleaning though in between the groups.
I think it'd be hard too with daycare. I mean, there's a lot of parents working.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would help though with if CDC is recommending being indoors for the least amount of time. So instead of 8 hours a day, if a kid can only be there for a half a day, that might help with what Stephanie Risky is saying.
Are we able to utilize more outside space to be able to use Wi-Fi outside and do more classes that way while the weather is decent also?
We definitely can use outdoor learning spaces.
Yeah, the largest issue as far as some of the things that I know of and run into is that single parent household that they have to work and there isn't somebody readily available to jump in a half day or alternate situations. There needs to be consistency so that, you know, clear planning can be made, but with the single parent situation, it's quite a challenge to be able to find that additional childcare in order to cover, you know, certain times and certain seasons of the year too.
Well, weren't they, it says that they're going to be K up to grade 8, they'll be, or was it grade 6? They're going to be all day. It was the high school that was going to run the everyday or the cohort days, right? So they wouldn't necessarily need daycare.
Yeah, and we did talk about, and Dan was looking into it, whether or not he could physically distance the high school students. Dan, did you want to talk a little bit about how you're starting the investigation on that?
Sure. I started today with reaching out to
Jackie.
I started off today by reaching out to the Hoffman Corporation to get some square footages so we can start doing some calculations. We also know that we have some flexible space within the high school, whether that be collaborative spaces. We're not serving lunches tentatively in the commons area, which could double as a larger classroom setting, because I needed to get enrollments of my classes and say, okay, what is the maximum amount of people that I can have in any certain specific classroom and still maintain 6-foot distancing. So we're investigating square footages of the rooms and class sizes as far as those that are specific to classrooms, because we know that Our enrollments in our classes range anywhere from 10 to 12 kids in a classroom all the way up to 28. So it will all depend on whether or not we can do that 6-foot distancing. Ms. Ryerson, I heard you mention that whether or not there was Wi-Fi access outside. They're not reliable, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong. We don't have reliable outside Wi-Fi access, and obviously due to inclement weather and being in Wisconsin, we know that might be a temporary solve for some classes, but for something to be consistent, to have Wi-Fi access as well as weather concerns, I think would be a challenge for our teachers.
That is correct. Yeah, there is not reliable Wi-Fi around the building.
But they can go out in the school forest for environmental education, or they could take a walk or play disc golf or do some physical activities outdoor to get fresh air and in socially distancing types of ways.
Certainly, we would encourage any kind of outdoor ed for fresh air for kids that's available. But being in Wisconsin, we know that will come to an end shortly. So we need to plan for being able to be inside.
And then, Dan, did you want to talk a little bit about band and choir? Because we've been reading the research that particulates in the air are projected more in band and choir situations. So we have to treat that a little bit differently.
We do, and we're going to be looking at schedule opportunities to be able to have kids attend band and choir in cohorts. We don't have all the specifics figured out yet, but we know that Mr. Rowan would probably prefer, if he has a limited amount of people that he can have in his space, we can do a couple things. We can either categorize them by section. In other words, today the woodwinds are coming. The maximum band size that we have that we're preparing for is 30 students. So if we had a sectional of kids, we could rehearse per section, woodwinds, brass, percussion, and then still maintaining our 6-foot distancing. We also do have the commons area where we would be able to spread out further to be able to help provide those safety factors. And that would be the same thing with choir, that on any given day, today the sopranos are coming, tomorrow the tenors and basses, and then the third day the altos. So we need to get creative with our opportunities for how those music kiddos are coming on into class.
Do we know anything specific about Phy-Ed classes and the extra particulates in the air with the heavier breathing and exercise?
I'm thinking if we looked at the WIAA summer sports specific, we get kind of a sense of the different sorts of activities that could be done. And we're also hoping that the fitness center should be ready and open by then. So if we don't use every piece of equipment, you could probably be 6 feet apart if you used every other treadmill or something like that. And the teachers might have to get creative then in how to separate people out in the room. Maybe doing some yoga or mat work while some are on the pieces of equipment.
I also have one other question, and then I'll stop talking. I don't know if this is coming later on in the presentation, but have we had thought about what happens if we have to run? Well, when we have to run an emergency drill, everyone is in the hallway to exit the building for a fire drill at the same time, or a tornado drill. Everybody's packed in downstairs, or an intruder drill. Everybody's in one area of the room to be away from the door. So what do we do in situations like that? Or what's the plan or the proposed plan?
We did start to talk about that at the admin team. One thing we haven't completed was our ALICE training, but we aren't all going to hunker down, turn out the lights and lock the door like we used to. So that plan benefits us because every teacher assesses the situation and reacts and does what's necessary. Dan, did you have thoughts on fire and tornado. Those are the common ones for the fall.
I did, and I reached out to Chief Rosano, and he did respond. I didn't get a chance to share it with the admin team. It just came in later today. But preliminary things are saying that we certainly could do our fire drills and maintain our 6-foot distancing. That is something that we certainly can practice. And we need to drill that, especially being in a new facility, knowing our exit routes and making sure our kiddos are acquainted with the paths of exit. As far as tornado drills are concerned, he suggested if we allow cohorts to be able to move within the building, that we could do it in a staggered way to not get people down there so they know the path of where to go. He said, obviously, if we were directly in the path of a tornado and we had to take our chances, we would make sure that we were in the safest area for a tornado. That would be the first priority. He also, once the building is done, is going to come in and take a look at some of those interior rooms. So that way we could also look at another option for being able to move to areas that don't have wind tunnels as well as exterior glass. So I think we've got some options on how to prepare and how to drill those things and still maintain our 6-foot distancing and safety precautions all in place.
So to clarify with the fire drill, in the moving out part, Jed's talked about with us that close contact is defined as being inside of the 6-foot perimeter for 15 minutes or more. So it's an extended period of time. So if we're all moving and if there's a real fire, we better be moving pretty fast. The 6-foot distancing would come into play, how we line up the people outside while we're counting off. And there we can have cohorts of students lined up in different areas. We definitely have the space for that here at the elementary. And I think high school could always use the new green space we're creating. It'll be green as soon as we plant something green in it, but hopefully by fall it'll be green. And so then you could really get your groups far apart and the kids could line up with a distance between them. So I think if they got used to it, if anybody's been in the back of Waiwega, since their K-12 is all in one long building, when they go out, they have wooden markers with the teacher's name on it. And so the kids are always spaced out behind the wooden markers all the way along the perimeter of their property along the back. So maybe we think of something like that to delineate where each teacher is supposed to go that gives you your own space. Excellent question. Danny, did you have anything in particular for the younger children in drills?
Nothing specific at the moment. Right now, we are looking at doing for the fire drills, doing a kind of like a rotation of having them get out of the classroom. We would do it all at the same time, but we would make sure that students, they kind of went class by class to go out with 6-foot, with social distancing. And then for tornado drills, that's something that I'm still working on. How can we do that with having it as authentic as possible, especially for our little kiddos, but yet keeping everybody safe with social distancing. So those are some of the things that I'm working on right now.
So I know one of you asked about enforcement, and I don't know if the principals want to speak to that, but I think one of the things we do every fall is we really spend the first couple of weeks just reinforcing classroom expectations and rehearsing. How do you enter a high school science lab? What does it look like when you go to physical education? So I think as we train the kids in their different learning environments, I think we'll just continue to rehearse these new health habits. I've done a lot of reading about what happens in other countries, and these are quite commonplace for them. The kids have grown up kind of with a different mindset. And so I think if it's practiced, if we keep it positive, principals, would you have anything to add about how you'd reinforce it among students, or if you've got a student who won't comply?
This is Danny. I'll jump in at the elementary level. One of the things that we're looking at doing is keeping students with their class for the day so that they're not, and it sounds easy when you think of it elementary because they're with their classroom teacher. They kind of have the same teacher all day, but it's a little more complicated than that when we're talking about our specials classes and walking in the hallway and, kind of lunch and recess and all of that. So really, in my mind, it's a lot about educating the parents when we're talking about, especially the really young students, because I think I know I am well aware of different people that I know through family, through friends that have very different philosophies about this whole situation. It goes from people that are still not leaving their homes and are staying away from everyone as much as possible, to people who are going and doing like life never changed back when we were in February and kind of living our lives that way. So I think we have to be cognizant of each family's beliefs and what they think, but yet giving them the information, educating them so that when students are coming in, it won't be as much of a battle if people can really understand that what we're doing is keeping each other safe and all of our families as safe as we possibly can. So family education prior to school starting is going to be huge. And as at the admin team, we've been bouncing around a few ideas of how to do that appropriately. And then it is educating our students when they come in and really knowing that all the staff understands what the plan is, and we kind of have all the kinks worked out as much as possible before the students come in.
I would agree with Danny that I think a lot has to be focused on education. But in my instance, I also know we need to set it up for success with the way we set up the physical proximity of the room. A couple things that we know that we're looking at investigating right now is obviously the social distancing. We're going to set our classrooms up so they're not going to look the same. If there's excess furniture and things that need to be moved out in order to space desks apart appropriately, that's what's going to be done. Right now, we're not planning on serving food in the cafeteria. We're looking at having food delivered to the rooms to keep those cohorts together as much as possible. The middle school suite, with the construction plan that we have, a majority of the students' day, if not all of it, can be spent in that middle school environment. Additionally, we're looking at spreading things out using spaces, as I said, whether it be in the commons or collaboration spaces. And it's going to be about routines. It's about cleaning procedures for the teachers. It's about, right now, we're not anticipating, and I know some parents will possibly be stressed about this, not using lockers. We're going to have continual movement through the school, staggered bell times. And eventually this will become, kids like procedures, actually. If, as much as they say they don't like rules, it helps keep them swimming in their own lane. We'll keep them moving in the hallways so that way there isn't time to stop and chat. We know that individual water bottles are going to be used and not a common place for a drinking fountain. So the environment, along with the education and the drill and practice of routines and procedures, I think are going to be the key to success.
Any thoughts or reactions? And I'm watching the chat box too, in case anything were to pop up.
I do like the emphasis on the education ahead of time and the positive messaging, because I feel like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're inherently asking kids to do something that is not developmentally appropriate. You know, like, I mean, you know, in an ordinary, regular, non-COVID situation, we're, you know, sharing and taking turns, and, you know, very heavy emphasis on, you know, cooperative and group work and things like that. So, but I do think it's going to have to be, you know, kind of I mean, obviously a district and community-wide kind of emphasis. You know, I like that, you know, like, you know, looking out for each other and all of that kind of thing.
Thanks. So we were looking at returning to normal grading, but being very clear about what essential standards are going to be the focus, because we suspect with some of the additional hand washing, some of the routines are probably going to take a little bit longer, which may take away from some of your instructional time, that we have to be really clear and focused about what we want to accomplish in instruction. So we talked about that being a conversation among the teaching staff. Here's a controversial one. Some districts are going to closed campus policies, which would mean at the high school incentivizing the students that have the special honors pass in with other types of incentives other than the freedom to go out at lunchtime. But if we work really hard all day to keep cohorts together and to be able to help the health department if we had to identify individuals for contact tracing, if they mass exit at the noon hour, we've kind of lost control of the situation. What are some thoughts on, or first blush reactions on that?
I've gone to school with both situations, closed campus and open. Again, it's something that as long as you're upfront about it, here's the rules, it's getting used to it. You know, having to, you know, for those kids that generally go home for lunch or, you know, run downtown and grab a sandwich, it's a change of habit, and how that would be addressed as far as whether they're bringing their own lunch or whatever. But I've been through both. It was just, you know, a learning curve as far as getting everybody to understand, and, you know, policing for the first couple of probably month and a half to making sure that, you know, the kids weren't just, you know, taking off and coming back in.
I know that one's going to be a learning curve for some of our parents, because I have had some contentious phone calls in the past that my child is leaving and they're going home, and they're either stoking the fire because that's what they have to do, or feeding the dog, or whatever the case may be, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, we're going to have to ask for some empathy on the part of some other families to say this is really about best practice, and we're trying to do this for the collective good of everyone. So I'm sure I'll have some individual circumstances that will flare up about parents demanding that their child be able to leave. So we'll take them one at a time.
I think outside of the lunch, I mean, on a normal, usual year, we would have kids leaving for appointments here and there and coming back and all of that. So I think that's another thing we might have to try to educate and look for empathy and understanding from families to say, please do your best to, you know, have an appointment in the morning or early morning or later in the afternoon, so that once the kid's at school, they're staying there and not coming, leaving, coming back for appointments or other things, because it would be the same situation that we would be facing if we allowed kids to eat lunch or to leave for lunch.
I'm assuming some of those appointments are like the orthodontist, and they're probably with a family member going to the orthodontist appointment and coming back. As a person who was just recently at the dentist office, I know they're taking extraordinary precautions about how many people they allow in at any given time. There's nobody in the waiting room. I had to stay in my car until they called and said I could come in. And so they were pretty careful about, again, for contact tracing purposes, I think, not having us come in contact with any other individuals than would be necessary, specifically the technician and the dentist. And that's about the only people you saw.
True, but you don't know how many, we wouldn't know how many stops were made from school to appointment and back to school.
Yeah, I'm hoping that wasn't like going to the mall and maybe the ortho. Yeah, you're right, but we're going to have to ask for people's help to minimize that. But
also, you know, the kids, once they leave school for the day, are going to be going everywhere anyway. So, I mean, whether they leave for lunch in the middle of the day or they leave, you know, at the end of the day and come back the next morning, they're essentially, I mean, they're coming and going either way. Granted, you could prolong it for that little bit of time, but I mean, once they leave school, we have no control over where they go or what they do.
that is true.
You know, that's a true statement, and I'm sure that argument is going to be put up, but I think as a school district, we have to demonstrate best practice to be able to make sure that we can do the contact tracing and not just open the doors, the floodgates. I was concerned about the open campus policy being shut down as well, but we have to take the educated stance as this is what we're doing for best practice. Trust me, I'm not looking forward to having some of those conversations. The other,
I do agree with that. I just, you know, like for appointment wise, I mean, if they have an appointment, sometimes it's really hard to get an appointment either the beginning or the end of the day. So I do agree that they shouldn't have free reign at lunch, but, you know, appointments.
I agree. I know the other thing that you mentioned, but I don't know if we commented on it, was we were not allowing students to use lockers. They will be allowed to have backpacks in their classroom to carry their supplies with them for the day, which then wouldn't encourage students loitering in the halls and going to their lockers. They would go from class to class, you know, and move. They can't loiter in the hallway and stop at lockers. So another thing that might be a bone of contention with some of our parents. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess I'm wondering, you know, come winter, where are you putting all of the winter gear that these guys are coming in with? Because again, you know, when it's 20 below, I'd like them to have, you know, a good solid jacket, boots, you know, all the gear. Where are we going with that? Generally, I'm okay with a backpack carrying from class to class with your books and your supplies, but where am I going with all their outdoor gear?
I don't know if we figured that out yet.
No, I think though at the elementary, because they don't go from class to class, they'll be staying in. Yeah, it's gonna be tight in some of our, especially in some of our grades that have more students, so they have more students in the room. But it may, we don't know where we're gonna be in winter, but it's not as bad as at well, and I think the junior high, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, the middle school will be a lot like the elementary school when you're thinking about not really moving throughout the building and having to carry. That would be more of the high school kids who typically have a few less articles of clothing in the winter, if I'm not mistaken.
I would agree that obviously 20 below are coming from their cars or their buses and they're wearing a sweatshirt, and I'm like, where is your coat? It's not my battle at the moment, but maybe Jed, have you heard of any of the other schools with the same type of locker proposal that we're going with? Any solutions or any conversation pieces that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think most of the schools are along the same lines of not using lockers. We haven't gotten into conversations to the winter clothing yet, so I don't know if I have any suggestions on that piece yet.
I think at the elementary.
Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. I think at the elementary school, we're going to have to think about parents that are coming for lunch. We have quite a few parents who come and join their student for lunchtime. I guess we're going to have to think about that as well. Another thing that needs to be on the watch list of how we're going to handle that.
You'll notice when we get a little later into assumptions, we're going to be limiting all non-essential guests. So because we don't want to expose the children to that child's been exposed to their parent, obviously, but every other child in that cohort group hasn't been. So we probably are not going to have our step volunteers. Number one, because most of them being retired individuals are in that high-risk group, but also not introducing other guests into the building. I think we're hoping
one thing that I would suggest too is for the kids who are currently doing mental health counseling, a lot of the counselors are doing it through Zoom. So if we want to eliminate the children leaving the school, to go home for that Zoom call, maybe we could offer a space. And I don't know if we could at all, but it's just a suggestion so that they could continue with their counseling and not have to leave school, since most of it is through Zoom right now anyways.
We have
I know.
Well, this Danny, I'll speak from for the elementary school. I can tell you right now, that sounds like a fantastic idea. And that's something that we can take a look at. The only thing for our little kiddos, we'd find, because I'm guessing maybe the parents would want to be involved in that. So we would need to take a look at a place where we could kind of keep them kind of away from.
Well, if it's through Zoom, the parents could also call in separately for the different
Oh
locations.
yeah, that
as well.
makes sense too.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea.
And Danny, I have an idea. You and I can talk. I think I've got an idea where that can happen.
Thank you, Luann.
So we would more than welcome that. In fact, we had talked about setting up a relationship with a professional counselor to provide more accessibility for mental health support in the school setting. So that's great. We do have small office spaces available where that could happen. Then our staff are doing it right now, as are all the contractors. There's a morning screening form, and we took our questions right from the CDC. So we ask everybody if they have a fever, if they're experiencing any symptoms, if they've been exposed. There are 4 questions. If they answer, 5 questions. If they answer yes to any of them, then we ask them to stay home and, if need be, contact their healthcare provider. So we've been talking about how we would do this. We're hoping to solicit parent support to think about those questions. We could send a paper copy home at the start of the school year, but we can also send them electronically. Everybody right now fills it out as a Google form. So we have record of every staff member and every contractor that comes into the building that they've answered the questions. I check them. The lead on our contracting company checks them. And if somebody forgets, we remind the person to fill it out. But the question might be, how will we verify that in the fall? How will we make sure everybody does it before they come to school in the morning?
Also, if I can ask, what happens if they do come with a fever? How long do they have to be gone, or how are we going to handle that to make sure that it's enforced? Because I know I keep repeating myself with that, but my biggest concern is enforcing it without parents getting very angry and upset, but also making it safe for everybody by enforcing it.
Well, if they have COVID symptoms, we have to have an isolation room, and they need to stay in there until the parent is able to pick them up or one of their emergency contacts. And then it will depend on what the test results are. So I think right now, test results come back in 2 to 3 days. So if the symptoms persist, and you'd stay home until you get test results that show you're negative.
So if that student would come the next day, we would again have to put them in isolation until parent came and picked them up and we got those results.
If they're still showing symptoms.
So if they have a fever one day but come back the next day without one, then they can stay?
If they don't have any other symptoms.
Stephanie,
I'm trying to think of the kind of illness that would cause a one-day fever, but.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about too is we typically, with kids, you're looking at more than one because, you know, like when you're talking about coughing and sneezing, we've got hay fever at the beginning of the school year and everybody's coughing and sneezing and their nose are running like crazy. So another thing too is really educating the staff on what does that mean. I get concerned when it comes to asking for all the students to be screened because especially at the elementary level, I'm not sure who would be able to monitor who filled it out in the morning, and making sure that as they get off the bus, and what if a kindergarten parent doesn't fill it out, they're at school, you know, it's kind of some of those things. I'm not sure that we would be able to really do a good job of monitoring that. But and I can tell you that being in any elementary school, every year there are students that are sick and parents don't pick them up or they come to school sick, and we know that, so that's nothing new. It's just going to be the isolation of the students is going to be a little bit more, it won't be just sitting in the nurse's office with other kids coming and going and getting their meds.
I'll just add to that. Individuals that have symptoms and are potentially, considered having being probable for COVID-19, the recommended, isolation is at least 10 days. So 10 days from onset of symptoms, and then 3 days of improved symptoms, including fever, without medication. And so that's the standard guideline right now. So testing is probably going to be pretty important to be able to sort through whether a student or an individual is COVID-19 positive or some other illness. So those are some considerations that we're going to have to keep in mind as well.
One of the reasons we had talked, thank you, Jed. One of the reasons we had talked about keeping the kids in cohorts is such as Mrs. Rosine's class and Ms. Breaker's class, or however they're doled out, is if one student in that cohort is found to have COVID-19, and we may have to isolate those students for a period of time, hopefully just that cohort or class will be sent home, not closing down the whole school. Just they're only in one room with one set of kids, with one teacher, or the teachers coming to them. So hopefully we'd be able to contain it, try to be a little more proactive that way. We did talk this morning in our county superintendent's meeting with Jed about the fact that we'd also have to be careful about asking screening questions at school because of HIPAA. So there isn't time to ask every child every question every day. And you're all in the same room, so someone could overhear. So again, we have to be very careful that we're protecting confidentiality. We cannot affirm if someone in the community asks us and a classroom is not in session right now, they're learning from home, we can't affirm or deny if or who has COVID. So the rules are very strict about that.
For the kiddos riding the bus, I mean, if we did some kind of questioning, that would actually have to happen prior to them even getting on the bus though, right?
Well, that's why we're hoping parents are going to pre-screen at home. That, you know, we're going to try to give prompts to get them to think about these common symptoms. And if their child has it, to keep them home, not even put them on the bus or drop them off with us. But I do know we have some desperate parents that tell me, they've called, that they don't have anywhere else for their child to go. So if their child can't stay with us, they don't have a backup plan.
Jacob, I know that I've been wondering what Cobuson's plan is for social distancing on a bus. What high level things, if anything, can you share at this time as far as transportation with all these kiddos?
So right now, most of it's all up in the air still. We're mainly waiting on the districts to see how many students will need transportation still, because most districts are sending out the survey, as you guys did. But to do social distancing on buses is pretty hard to do. You go from a bus that can hold 72 students down to 13. We'd have to double the buses that we have. So that's our main issue. We'd have to make 2 runs for each route at least. So it's going to be very hard to do social distancing. But that's where we're at, is we're mainly just waiting on districts to see where they would like to go and see what they would like us to do mainly.
So we hopefully will see soon, Jacob, about how many parents were thinking of using busing in the fall. And then maybe using that information, you could speculate about how many people that would be per bus and whether or not that's doable.
What I saw just on your screen a little bit ago is a lot more will be transporting their students, which will help us do social distancing. And once we would get a set number of students that still need busing, that's when we'll make our seating charts where they have the same seat every day. The first student on the bus, they'd probably go to the back of the bus right away. That way they don't cross paths on the bus.
Is there plexiglass between the seats now, that like a sneeze guard?
So they are making those for the buses, and the state troopers, or I don't know the division that just approved it, but they just released the guidelines of what we'd actually have to do to install plexiglass. The biggest thing is, if the bus was in a crash, the plexiglass would shatter, so it has to be shatterproof. That way the kids wouldn't get hurt. So they just came out with that guidance today. So we're still looking into it, but that is an option.
So a few more things we've been looking at. With those cohort groups, having students stay together in their classroom, have lunch served in there, have the specials like teacher on a cart come into the classroom and do the activities there while the weather's nice, or even in the winter, getting dressed up properly and going outside to play for Fayed, doing more of those kinds of activities. Danny's already set up travel patterns with Mary and Kevin for summer school. So it's kind of one-way traffic and keeps kids from intersecting with one another when they're going to common places. So we're trying to do some of those things.
Can I ask a quick question on, keeping everybody together? I understand that. I'm going to speak from my granddaughter's perspective. It's going to be very devastating to her if she's not able to interact with her best friends. And that was a huge issue during the homeschooling situation. And I know that if they're in close proximity, she's going to break the rules just because she can't see her best friend, kind of thing. So how are we going to handle that stress when you're keeping them in smaller groups and they're not with the people that they really want to spend some extra time with, that they are used to being able to interact with?
Danny, I think or Luann, I'll let you speak to the social issues. We know it's a major concern. We know the isolation has created some really challenging situations. I lost a young friend back in my other district, a sophomore this year, who committed suicide.
It's definitely a big concern. One of the things that I'm actually scheduling a meeting with a leadership team in the building. And one of the big things we have to figure out is how to create a community that we're all here together, but yet we're not together and we can't be together. So really working on how do we create that community in such a crazy time, and then how do we educate the teachers to see what to look for when kids are really struggling when it comes to their mental health. And then that's where Luann is going to be a huge asset, and she's going to be very busy over just working on comforting students and explaining in a way that they will understand.
Yep, and even to be able to comfort them in a way that they really truly need. I think Janine hit it right on the head when we're asking kids to do things that are not developmentally appropriate, because they seek out touch and attention and all of those things. So to try to teach them to do that in a different way is going to be a challenge.
And to Stephanie Rutzke's point where she said the high school students will have the same challenges. Honestly, when we were talking about even just the not hugging and not touching of students, I was thinking first, I was like, oh yeah, our kindergarten kids, our younger kids. And I'm like, wait a minute. I taught in middle school. Those kids stop touching each other. So I think it's really going to go across great age levels, really to be able to be conscious of this. And I know, I think the teachers, I've been in the district long enough and I've said enough, we have to talk to students. We have to explain to them why and listen to their concerns and their questions. And when they're really heard, I think we can get some more cooperation from certain students when we really talk to them and be real with them.
I think that another really hard point is, my daughter plays volleyball on Tuesday nights, and they are all together, all their friends. There's no social distancing outside of school. So it's going to be hard for them to realize that at school you have to stay your distance when the minute you get outside, you don't have to. And I think it's going to be hard because they're going to buck us because they're going to say, well, I was just with him last night. Why do I have to do it here? I guess we're going to have to really think of some good answers for them so that they can understand that at school, this is the rule and it has to be followed. Because I think it's going to be really hard for them.
I agree. I also agree that, if I'm understanding the process right, that we're planning on, the kids in the cohort would actually come into the classroom and stay there all day or almost all day. And the teachers would change by coming in. I'd come in for math. Somebody else would come in. Mrs. Millard would come in for ELA, but the kids are staying in that room. They're also eating in that room. And they're sitting in their one seat because that's placed 6 feet apart from everybody else, and they can't move in that one room all day.
Except
So
once
I'm
every
not
hour, wash your hands.
Well, right, we do have to wash our hands. It's just,
Yeah, it
there's
doesn't.
sorry, go ahead.
It doesn't sound inviting or normal because we're social human beings. Most people want to be with other people.
Right, and I just think it will cause, some possibly unforeseen mental angst as well, especially if you're in an interior room all day.
At the elementary level, we are looking at doing, we still will have recesses. So they will go outside, weather permitting, but they will be with their cohort. And I'm working on, I've got some preliminary schedules on how we can get that done. And it opens up just like earlier we were talking about the morning and afternoon having different cohorts. And it sounds great, but it opens up all these other questions like busing. That's twice as much busing. And how can we afford that as a district? If I need more people out supervising recess, that's a whole nother issue that we have to, but we do want to encourage the classes getting outside as much as possible, but we also have to then balance the social distancing with that also.
Right. And we also know people need sunlight, so we're going to have to find ways to get outdoors and get kids down in the fitness center where there's a lot of natural light coming in, get them out in the school forest, get them out on the track, trying to do some of those sorts of things for physical activity, movement.
I want to address Jesse Ort put in a comment about I'll read it so that I don't get it wrong. Doesn't being sedentary in a room fly in the face of diversification of learning and the studies that movement for all ages? Honestly, Jesse, almost everything that we're proposing to do flies in the face of everything I believe in as an educator, that I believe good education is. But right now we are balancing the health, the physical health of our community, and that it really does, everything is against the no movement, the having, the staying in the same room, the not sharing, and sharing equipment and materials. Everything goes in the face of what I believe as an educator. So we really have to balance good education with the health of everyone.
We've spent years working on having people work in small teams and knowing how to collaborate so they can do that when they leave high school. We just built a middle school and a high school collaboration space in the building so that they could leave the classroom in small clusters and have those opportunities to work in those groups. And as I was touring with Dan last week and taking a look at some things, it just broke my heart to think that we can't use those spaces the way they were intended, because I've been looking forward to that for a couple of years. So it's like taking kids to the candy store and tell them to look and not touch. We're not buying anything. It's not going to be easy.
No, I would agree, and the challenges are present at the high school with the social distancing. Danny, I know I saw a comment in there about special ed as far as pull out and maintaining their IEPs. Maybe that's something, since you're still director of special education, you want to comment on?
Sure, I was typing a comment, but now I'll say it out loud. I am meeting with teachers. We were emailing back and forth last week. The special ed teachers as a department, we're probably going to meet separate between the elementary and the middle school, high school, just because age of students and our populations. We're going to have to be creative. This may mean some changes in IEP minutes, because we have to look at least restrictive environment and balance least restrictive environment and the cohorts. It's going to take a little bit for us to figure out, depending on the different groups of kids that we have. So there's no easy answer, there's probably just more questions, which all of this is. But yes, I'm working with teachers on that specifically.
Do we think that, and I'm going to ask the administrators and the parents, would the results of the survey change at all if the plan, if the parents ahead of time knew the plan, like, okay, we'll return to school, but this is what return to school looks like, because it's not going to look like what you came from? Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, your kid is going to be in this room. They're going to be in there for 4 hours in the morning, and then, or whatever the breakdown is. They stay in the room, in their desk. The teachers come in and out, but the kids don't move. Like, would that be beneficial and change anyone's survey on whether or not they'd be ready to send their kid to school, or really would that not matter? I don't know. So
I don't know if it's better. I think it would, which is one of the reasons why we want to get a plan out there as soon as possible and let people know what this is going to look like. Because there are people that told me, why do we need a reopening committee? They just said open. Go back to just like it was, last fall. So there are a lot of people that I'm sure are going to find this very confusing and enraging, I think. I would not be surprised at all if I don't get threatening phone calls.
Yeah.
As a parent, I will say that I kind of had in my own head, if school does plan A, this is my plan. If school does plan B, this is my plan. So I think the survey would definitely change. If there was this is our concrete as we can be with COVID, I should say, plan, then what are your feelings? So I definitely think the survey would change.
What I do know, Tracy, though, is all the county schools are doing something very similar.
I would say as a parent, though, from a parent standpoint, from even myself, one of my children would do very well in this situation, but the other would not. And I don't know that if we were going in that direction, if it wouldn't be better for me to homeschool one of them just because of that. Because they would thrive better in a homeschool position that way, because sitting still in a desk, not moving, would be like making me sit still in a desk and not moving. It wouldn't go well. And they just would not do well in that situation and that structure. I guarantee you, Mr. Wolfram will see him a lot if that is where he ends up going and the way we go with it.
So one thing we are looking at offering, and Bryant's already working on ordering cameras, is synchronous education, which basically means there'll be a camera in every classroom so that the students that are learning from home, either because they're ill or because the parents prefer that they learn from home, would be able to see the teacher's instruction, see the instructional materials, participate in class discussion. So it would be synchronous live. We're also looking at taping it for those kids that learn better at different times of the day. So there would be options for parents who would prefer that their children stay at home.
If I can add to that real quick, the teachers have done some amazing things the last few months with learning to use media in ways that they didn't in the past. For example, I think Mariette is on here. She did a lot of great videos where she would show and demonstrate how to do math skills, and then would post that to websites for students to see. So we're going to continue doing that and then try to add to that, so that if we do have a situation where a student can't be at school or the parents are more comfortable with it, then that is a viable option for them to continue learning while using the technology. And supporting the teachers in doing that is obviously going to be a lot of work, but the teachers have already done a lot of great work with that.
I know there was some concern with some parents based on their internet capabilities, and things like, my student is not able to view this video because I live wherever XYZ and our internet is not good, so my student couldn't take advantage of all of these special videos and such. So Has anything changed kind of from that standpoint?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I mean, the internet situation from a high level hasn't changed in our region, right? So the people who have the internet now in their homes, unless they have upgraded their internet, it's still going to have the same limitations they have. We're going to continue having the Khajiits that we have right now, but from a high level, their internet they have at home is going to be the same as what they had a few months ago. That's kind of outside the scope of what we can do as part of this committee. But one thing to consider is before, where people were staying at home full time, if they're rotating in or if they're here part of the day, we could work out something where they can maybe download the videos and then take them home if they have that sort of planning. But it really depends on what their specific situation is. So if they're a family where they have 3 students at home and a parent's working from home and they're kind of relying on the internet for 4 people, then we need to have some discussions about what we can do to either give them another Khajiit so they have more internet, or maybe that student isn't able to be live and they need to do more of a distance learning where it's more remote. So in some ways we're gonna have to work with those families. Yeah.
Brian, did you want to talk more about technology integration just in general? I know we're looking at a platform for the younger child that's more user-friendly than the G Suite.
Yeah.
For just a second.
Yeah, happy to. For the secondary school, we use Google Classroom as our LMS, along with Google Docs and Sheets, or the G Suite platform for the learning. And then we also have access to some new tools, such as media tools, such as Loom, which is a screen recorder, Edpuzzle, which is a way to do assessments, as well as Flipgrid, which is another way to provide media to students and let them provide feedback. That works great for grades 6 through 12. Now for the elementary school, they have access to those tools as well, but for a first grader, G Suite doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? They're just too young to use that. So we're looking at some other tools such as Seesaw, is a learning management system that is catered more for the younger grades. It works for higher grades as well, but we're really looking at it for the 4K through 5. And what that would do is allow us to provide the platform for teachers to publish lessons in a way that parents can get it at home on pretty much any device. So the computer, tablets, laptops, Chromebooks. It allows the teachers to better communicate lessons to the families for the lower grades, for the younger grades, I should say. Part of the survey that Dr. Opper sent out was trying to get a gauge on the density of technology at home, right? So if you have 4 kids at home and you have 1 device, that's not enough, right? But what we're finding is a lot of families have a computer at home or an iPad at home or something like that. Our district isn't one-to-one for all of our grades. We don't have a device for every single kid in the district. We do for 6 through 12, but for the younger grades, if we were to shut down again for several weeks at a time like we did this year, then what we would want to do is to put devices in the hands of the families that need it. So if there's no device at home, we want to try to put a device in the hands of the families that need them. And I saw a few questions pop up, so I'm going to open that up real quick. I think those might be for me. Can we explore and make it a priority to come? Well, it's not that. We'll be exploring that at the elementary level. So I think, Luann, you were talking about the LMS. Is that correct?
I think they're looking for social opportunities using Google as a way to connect kids with their friends.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we had Google Meet restricted so that students couldn't create their own sessions. And we did that because we were concerned about student safety. So for example, if a student were to create a session and then invite somebody who was not a student, who was outside of our community, for example, an adult, that would be inappropriate. We wanted to make sure we had protections for that. But what we were finding was that the kids miss each other. So Google lets us track who's connecting to who. So we open it up so that students are able to connect with each other and see each other using Google Meets. I know that's something that like my kids personally used a whole lot. So we opened it up for students at some point during the school year.
Just a quick comment on the Seesaw program. I did work with one of my granddaughters from Sheboygan North School District with the Seesaw. It was fair. She was in second grade, so it was fairly intuitive for her to be able to use. The teacher with that school system, they did use Google Classroom for her to go into and look at, say, a video link, something else, and then it took her to Seesaw to complete some things. So it was fairly interactive as long as she remembered she had to go to Google Classroom first so that she got all of the steps that she needed to do. But it was fairly intuitive for a second grader to be able to utilize. So I've seen it in action and it works fairly well.
Yeah, we're seeing that like right at third grade is when the kids start typing. I have an 8-year-old who has been typing for years, but generally speaking, at third grade is a breaking point where a keyboard makes more sense for a student. So we're looking at devices for the younger grades that are Chromebooks, but they're tablets, so they don't have a keyboard, and they're more like kind of like an iPad sort of a shape and experience. So we're looking at making that more pervasive for the K through 2 grades, and then Chromebooks available for 3 and up. So it's kind of up to teachers when Seesaw makes more sense than Google Classroom, or it sounds like in the school district where your grandchild was in, they use both, which is kind of interesting. But we're probably going to try to keep it simple and use Seesaw for like the younger grades 2 and below, and then probably 3, 4, and 5. We're going to make that up to teachers to figure out where they want to make that shift. But yeah, so Seesaw, but at that point, they're using it in the classroom, but they're also trying to make it available for the families at home. So if we have to shut down, then the families are able to present lessons from their home device using one unified platform. Instead of having to ship home packets like we did, we think this might be more interactive than packets. Now, none of this is a silver bullet, and I would rather them be in front of their teachers, but this is just something that we can try to leverage to just make it a little bit easier for the teachers and the families. But a lot of that's going to come with development on the teacher side. The students, we need the students to learn more about how to use the technology earlier. So all the way down to pre-K and K, we need them to be able to pick up the device and have some understanding of how to use it, right? And then obviously families need to have some support in using this stuff at home. So whether it's online training or distance training, kind of like in the session we are in now, if we have the opportunity, in-person training would be great. So we'll have to really feel that out for what's available and what's safe. But there's just needs support for all the parties involved. Sorry, I've been talking a lot, so I'll stop talking for now. Is there any more questions about technology side of things?
The one other highly controversial topic that I wanted to bring up was wearing masks. Right now, it looks toward the leaning that county schools are probably going to have wearing masks as voluntary. But we have them free of charge for students to use. The state is sending 2 per person, so 1,500 masks are being delivered fairly soon. I think we'll get them in the next couple of weeks. They're cloth reusable. So the concept would be if a parent wants their child to have a mask, that they could get them when they get to school in the morning, and then they'd leave them with us at the end of the day. We have a washer and dryer in both schools, so we would be able to make sure we have them all laundered and ready for use the next day. That way it's not a financial burden on anyone to, have to purchase or find masks. But I do know when I talked to the statewide superintendent's group, one superintendent said, half the surveys came back that if you make my child wear a mask, then my child's not coming to your school. And the other half said, if everyone in school doesn't wear a mask, then my child's not coming to your school. And he said, what am I supposed to do? That was not the case with our survey. The questions related to masks on the first page of the survey indicate that parents, for the most part, aren't interested in having their kids wear masks, and they're not concerned if others are not wearing masks. But thoughts or feelings out there?
I know a comment was made to me if it was a choice between the kids going to school and wearing, if it meant the kids got to go back to school, they would wear a mask. The question was kind of black and white on the survey. It was yes or no. And that if it meant, we got to go and see the teachers and be in school, definitely would wear a mask. But prefer not to if they didn't have to, but if it meant going to school, they would put a mask on the child.
The CDC also has some guidelines as to how to get kids to wear masks, and they've got posters for in the hallway and things of that sort. But you could also give them an apple for wearing it, or some privilege. If you've got your mask on, you get to do this or have this type of activity associated with it. If you're willing to not wear a mask, well, then you can't associate, with the other children that are doing this event or activity. And the more they see that they're left out or have to be quarantined away from everybody, that it might force them or show them that this is, our policy across the board, that we highly recommend that you wear it. Even though it's optional, it's like, it's for everybody's benefit. If everybody wears it, the sooner we'll get over this and get on to your routine again. But
I was thinking that for the high school, it might be a nice option for some of the organizations to do a fundraiser. They have them anyway for the clothing. And if there was a wolf mask or something that helped tie it into school and school spirit, I think that would be something that the kids would buy into.
There are some fun ones. I know they've got them down at First State Bank because I've already seen the tellers wearing them in a photo where they're making a financial donation to the school.
I did get I got a really nice one that was embroidered in Mexico. So I didn't get, it was up here. I didn't go to Mexico, obviously, but yeah, it's really cute. Can't wait to wear it for school.
I have all variations of masks for many different outfits that I keep handy, and they're reversible. So depending on what mood I'm in, but the ones coming from the state are white. So there will be probably over 1 million of them distributed across the state. But I think that'll be a challenge. As Stephanie pointed out, we don't want to discipline kids for a decision made by their parents because oftentimes that is who will be making the decision. And then we talked this morning with the county superintendents that we have to be careful about discrimination. We can't deny someone a learning opportunity. We're going to have to get really creative about how to do it. Like Danny was talking about, how do we do what all the research tells us is best for brain development and try to minimize the risk. It's no small challenge. I haven't slept in days, which, by the way, research said is not a good thing either. So it does have a lot of us worried about how to do this and do it the right way, which is why I'm so grateful to all of you for being a part of the process with me. for the most part, I think we've covered the assumptions. Thanks, Tracy. So I think we've covered a lot of the assumptions, and I'm wondering if you want to take a few days to kind of chew on all of this information. Talk to people you know, friends, relatives, neighbors, colleagues, and see what kinds of thoughts and reactions you're getting. In the meantime, I'll take some of this and put it into a more pretty and easy to consume format. And maybe we can get together next week and see what are the looming issues, what are the biggest challenges that we're going to face as we look at the reopening process. And yes, part of being a decision-making and problem-solving group is to ask and make more questions. Anybody who's ever sat through one of my administrative team meetings knows that the four-letter word that we always talk about is the plan, and it always starts with more questions, and one question leads to 10 more questions. But ultimately, we stick with it until we come up with something that's going to work for people. It is not easy. And looking at your faces, I'm definitely getting an unhappy feeling that you're feeling the stress too about not knowing for sure what to do.
Yeah, this is Jed. I'll just add that, I mean, this is uncharted. This is uncharted waters. And as you can see, just going through this, how complex of a situation this is. And there's no perfect answers. We're gonna do the best we can. From my perspective, from public health, to work with Melody and the rest of the school administrators to put the best practices and protocols we can to help mitigate things and make things as safe as we can. But there's also going to be some risk in whatever we do. We just have to try to put everything together the best we can, and we're going to have to adjust. Things are going to change just like they have throughout this. Man, we're in 4 months. It's almost the end of June. We've been doing this since March, and it's such a complex and interesting scenario and situation. But I think Melanie and her team have really put together some good pieces and a good foundation, and I think all the questions you all have brought up have been extremely helpful too, from my perspective as well.
So then I think our next task is to set our next meeting date. The administrative team was going to try to put some hair on this dog next Wednesday. So it might be helpful for us to meet after that, unless you think we should try to meet again next Monday for you to give us information or feedback that we can use as we're working on the plan on Wednesday. What's your thought on that?
Do you need more feedback, or are you guys good to go from here, and then we'll meet with whatever steps you've made at that point?
I guess I need notes to, we've talked about a lot of different things. We've seen a lot of different things on the screen. I kind of need I've been taking some of my own notes, but I really think we need, a set of notes that we're all looking at the same thing to be able to kind of come back and say, okay, I need more answers on this, or this is probably an area we don't need to address so much anymore, but here's some other areas.
So what I was thinking of doing, it's not pretty now because I haven't had enough time to work with it, but I started putting together a slideshow that would organize information around the way we think in our district, which is our key performance indicators. We have 4 major buckets, and grouping each of the things that we've talked about at a high level into those different buckets. And then obviously there are too many words here, but making it readable so that we would have something we could share with parents. And so if I pulled that together based on the assumptions we've talked about tonight, I guess what I'd want to know from you before we part tonight is there anything that you heard us talk about in those assumptions that you can't live with, or you know that we're going to have to wrestle with a little bit more before we are ready to share?
I think I'm worried about space. I've had over 20 kids usually in a class, upwards to 26 or more. And I'm just picturing my classroom, and I can pull out a table, but other than that, and maybe some cupboards, the cupboards won't be there anymore. So that would give me about 2.5 more feet of space. But that's the thing that worries me, is how do I actually socially distance all the kids that are in the room if every kid is there every day? You know what I mean?
I know Tracy, your class is one of the smaller ones out of the middle school, and we may have to look. I know there's an additional classroom that's going to be available. Maybe we may have to look at swapping your, if the square footage, when I get that information back, is going to provide you more space, then we switch your room and we use your former room as a space for another utility. But I'll be investigating that as soon as I get some square footage. But yeah, I hear you. Melanie and I spoke today. So as soon as I look at some alternative spaces and how we can potentially best utilize them, we'll put our heads together and see if we can come up with a plan.
Thank you.
And I
appreciate
get
that.
one of the other things that I keep thinking about, maybe it's just because of my role, is how are we going to ensure like student buy-in on this? Do students have a voice? I just keep coming back to students like assigned to a cohort who they spend like the entire day with, and just I had anxiety just listening to that statement. So, is there a way to give kids choice safely? I don't know. I don't know even know what I'm saying. Or is there like some kind of survey for the kids, or, because I think it was Stephanie, you had a good point. Like they will leave school and be with who they want to be with anyway. But I just, I think especially at the junior high school level, maybe we need to think about some of those options.
I also think about myself, and if I was in a group with people that I didn't fit in with, or I maybe thought judged me, or I didn't feel comfortable with, and you're with them all day, the student's self-esteem or the student's learning ability is not going to be where we want it to be if they're stuck with a group of students that they don't get along with, or they feel inferior to, or anything like that. I don't know how it wouldn't be good for their learning. So I agree with you on that, bothering me too as well.
It's a little bit like military, either military school or the military, where you're assigned to your platoon and like they're all yours.
And that's challenging in Manawa. We know when things are normal is that we're basically a 2-section school. So I come back to the fact that we need to be teaching our kids the social emotional learning skills to be able to problem solve, and a lot of those things at the middle school level. Janine and I have been working with the staff to be able to, for self-regulation, for how to deal with the social emotional challenges that are going to be present for all of our kids. I don't know how many options we have. It's like I said, if we are a two-section school, you're possibly with this group or you're with the other group, similar to the way it was last year. We are limited by choices, so I think the key is going to have strategies to be able to work with our kids on how to problem solve, because I don't know that all of those variables will be able to be solved.
I do like the idea of that Ms. Risky Stephanie brought up earlier, with like an AM 4-hour and PM, because then it addresses some of those problems, like the student that has to sit there without moving all day. Well, now he only has to do it for half the day, and then the other half he can go home and run around the house 10 times.
As long as there's a grown-up there when the child gets home. But I think we know in our community that a large proportion are not home. They're at work.
And that
It helps
So
problems, but it creates a secondary set of challenges, everything from transportation to supervision.
And that brings up another issue of, when you call them at 10 o'clock in the morning and say that their child doesn't feel good and you have to go home, they're not going to be there to come pick them up, and they're going to send them the next day because they have no childcare for them. We've struggled with that through everything, through head lice, flu, everything. The parents, they rely on you to be their daycare. And if they're sick, I don't know if they'll come and get them or send them, they'll not keep them home.
And I've encountered some employers that are not very supportive, where we've called a larger employer and asked to speak to the employee, and apparently the employee gets a pink slip if they leave work for their child, and if they get 3 of those, they're unemployed. Our families, we have an approaching 40% poverty rate, so I know they love their kids, but they also have to feed and clothe their kids and pay the bills. And so I wouldn't want to be in their position trying to have to decide what to do, but they know there are caring people at school that will look after their child. So that will always be an uphill battle, I think. So I'm seeing we'll do a compiled list that organizes and makes it easier to take a look at all the information. Dan's going to try to put together some information on square footage to see just how doable it is. And Danny was working on something similar, I know, as well, for this building. We want to talk about social emotional learning a little bit more. And the one group we have not heard from, I'd like to have Mrs. East talk to us about food service. What would or could that look like? Because usually lunch is supposed to be a fun and relaxing time of the day. So let's talk about that next time. So are you thinking you want to do that on Monday? Next week, Monday, about 6 o'clock, or did you have a different preference? Next Monday would be July 6th. Does that work fairly well for most everybody? Okay, well, that looks like it's going to be pretty good. So we'll pull that together for next Monday at 6 o'clock. And if you think of other pieces of information that you would like, please let me know or send me an email if there are questions or concerns that come up following our meeting. And let me just check my notes. We might want to talk about what health visits are going to look like. So I'll see if Nurse Jackie can join us again next time and maybe tell us a little bit about what that's going to look like in the health room.
Melanie, Stephanie asked whether or not we can meet in person or not. I leave that to you and if that's viable or not.
We do reopen July 1 with all the remodeling. Finding a big enough room for our large group could be a bit of a challenge. We'd probably go down in the library and socially distance. But if you're comfortable, we could meet in the Manawa Elementary School library. What would be the preference of the group? I'm fine doing, we can also do what the board is doing in July, and that's mixed. So it's both online, virtual, and live. So those that want to come in person will provide a space for you. And
this is Danny. I would need to do virtual that day just because I have an earlier appointment, so I'll be at home. But I don't think it's a bad idea to have people make that choice if they'd like to meet in person.
I would also have to meet virtually as I have a late doctor appointment that afternoon.
should we do one more virtual and then talk about moving live after that? Okay, virtual it is. And because I haven't slept, I'm writing everything down because if I don't write it down these days, I may not remember. So you'll see an invitation coming out. I still have to do you one at a time because I haven't quite figured out how to get you in a group. I have to learn how to set that up. Mr. Kobrubius is going to help me with that. So I won't probably have you all invited tonight, but hopefully I'll do that tomorrow. Any closing thoughts for the good of the order? I'm just really appreciative to have you all here. Thank you all for your support, for bringing your diverse opinions, and for feeling comfortable to speak up with different points of view, because I think you do represent our broader community, and we need to make sure that school is a place that all our children feel like they belong. We don't want any parent to feel that they have to take their child out of school because this place doesn't fit them. So I'm sure we're going to find the answers if we just work at it hard enough. Right. Good night, everybody. Thanks again.
Good night.
Hey, Dr. Goodertz, you still there? I'm supposed to tell you hello from Dr. Brady. She said,
Oh, boy. Say hi to her if you see her.
I will. She's my sister, actually.